Hi there. Welcome to Conversations for Yoga Teachers. I'm your host, Karen Fabian, the founder of Bare Bones Yoga. If you're a yoga teacher who wants to feel more confident when you teach, sharing clear cues, moving freely and confidently around the room, and creating solid, amazing sequences, you are in the right place. Each week, I share practical tools and frameworks and anatomy insights to help you teach in a way that feels natural and authentic. Some episodes feature guests and some are solo teachings from me. Now, if you want more support, all you need to do is check the link in my Instagram or TikTok bio for freebies and my top programs, the Yoga Teacher Confidence Club and the Yoga Anatomy Accelerator. On both platforms, you'll find me at Bare Bones Yoga. Ready? Let's dive in. Hi there. Welcome to Conversations for Yoga Teachers. I'm your host, Karen Fabian, and this is episode 350. I'm recording this intro on May 15th, 2025. And the other day, I had the pleasure of interviewing Avi Gordon. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Avi in a moment. But before I get into the intro, I just want to leave you with one quick notice. One quick alert. I've been talking on a lot of the episodes recently about my brand new program, the Yoga Anatomy Accelerator. So if you're listening to this and you're the kind of yoga teacher who has connected feeling more confident in teaching your classes with understanding anatomy more, you are the perfect person for this program. It's a really short, focused training, thus the name Accelerator. And in just 4 sessions with a couple of videos in the portal, additionally, you will learn the fundamentals of anatomy and transform from a teacher who might be a little confused in their classes to a teacher who is confident. You'll shift from sort of repeating the same cues over and over again to sharing cues where you truly understand the anatomy behind the cue, even if you're not speaking to it. You'll learn how to share anatomy in your cues. You'll learn how to build sequences with a peak pose. All of this is possible in just 4 short, focused sessions. So I'll just leave you with that thought. You can get to the link in the show notes for the Yoga Anatomy Accelerator. You can also see it on my website, barebonesyoga.com. And you can also get to it right off my Instagram bio, Bare Bones Yoga. So with that, let's hop on or hop into the intro for today's guest. My guest today is Avi Gordon, and Avi serves as the director of the Integral Yoga Teachers Association, which is a global network of over 10,000 yoga teachers dedicated to spreading the timeless teachings of integral yoga. He also is the host of his own podcast, aptly titled the Integral Yoga Podcast, and Avi creates meaningful conversations on his podcast on personal growth, spirituality, and the yogic lifestyle. He is a devoted father of 2 and is passionate about integrating the principles of yoga into the practice of parenting and creating compassionate and mindful family environments. His journey has also taken him around the globe, teaching in Taiwan, South Korea, and in other places, Israel and the United States. Now, I'll put several links for different resources that he has in the show notes. He is the author of a book called A Light in the Tunnel, which is a visionary novel that inspires hope for a harmonious future for humanity and the planet. He is also the founder of Story Recorded, a professional interviewing service that helps people capture their life stories. So with that, let's hop over to that episode. Avi and I have a really in-depth conversation that touches on a number of different aspects of teaching yoga. And one thing in particular, we take a deeper dive into, which is how to show up authentically. This is at times a deep and meaningful conversation. I found that I learned a lot from it. And I really think it tackles a question that so many yoga teachers struggle with, which is how can I show up more authentically in my classes. And so when you listen to this episode, you'll find out what does that look like, what can that feel like, and what is possible for you. So here we go. Let's hop over to that episode, my conversation with Avi Gordon. Hi there.
Hey Karen, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good to see you again.
Good to see you. So I'm excited to have you on. For people listening, I was on your podcast, and this was kind of a natural, I feel like just a natural part two of sorts to have you on my podcast, and not so much continue the conversation, but go into a little bit about your background. I think I was just really intrigued by the amazing questions that you asked, and I thought this would be just a natural part two to have you come on the show. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to be here.
Cool.
Um, yeah, you want me to share a little bit about my background?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead and do that.
Yeah. Uh, well, I guess just in terms of yoga, uh, I feel that like my yoga life started actually. I was teaching English in South Korea. This is in 2009, and it's so funny. Like I can still remember vividly just one weekday night. It was like a Wednesday night or something like that. And I had a friend that I was teaching with, and she said, "Hey, I'm going to this yoga class tonight. Would you like to come with me?" And so often happens in life, like, well, at least for me, it happens a lot because I feel like I don't have often, a strong opinion one way or another.
Yeah.
And that's part of a practice too. So it's like right there between like, well, I'm just going to go home and take it easy or, experience this yoga class that would be new to me. And I was like, all right, yeah, sure, let's just do it. And it's amazing that just such a small, simple decision could lead to an entirely different type of life that I
Mhm.
now have. So yeah, I was hooked pretty much right away. What was interesting too about my beginnings is that so the teacher, did not speak any English at all, and I kept going back, and I loved her. She's still one of the best teachers I've ever had, and I would just watch her move with her body, and I just followed along. And that's always kind of impacted my view on teaching a lot because that, in a way, worked well for me. Sure, I would have liked to understand what she was saying, but it also taught me a lot about language and words too. So, yeah, I could go into a lot more details about what happened after that, but I'll pause there to see if you want to jump in.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that description, is so sort of poignant in a way because it must have really impacted you deeply to think that that was the beginning of what's become an entire lifestyle and career around yoga. Can you share? I mean, I know that was back in the beginning. Can you share a little bit about what happened from there that caused you to leave what you were doing? I mean, you said you were teaching English in
Hmm.
South Korea, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did things sort of build from there?
Yeah, so from there, it's not like I changed my whole life, but whatever it is that I was doing, wherever I was for a few years after that, I was always practicing yoga, right?
Hmm.
So through my 20s, I jumped around a lot. I lived a year here, a year there. So I was doing that, but from that point forward, I was always practicing, you know? And then after a few years of that, I started to think about doing a teacher training. And I wasn't even sure that I wanted to be a teacher, a yoga teacher, because my own practice was so precious to me, even at that point. Um, but I knew I wanted to go deeper, and I thought that that was a way to do that. So eventually I leapt and took a teacher training and started teaching, and then took lots of more teacher trainings after that. And um, yeah, and then eventually found myself living here at Yogaville many years later, Satchidananda Ashram Yogaville in Central Virginia. Um, and yeah, everything kind of went to the next level there when I found myself immersed in a yoga community. Yeah.
Got it. Now, you're going to have to give me a little more on that because I wanted to go into this as well. So maybe this is like the perfect time to go into this a little bit more. For the folks listening, you are the director of the Integral Yoga Teachers Association. And you just mentioned, it sounds like there's some sort of community. So tell us a little bit more about that style of yoga. Maybe we can get into a little bit about how you ended up being the director of this organization of over 10,000 teachers. Why don't we just start with the basics? Tell us a little bit more about what is integral yoga as a style of yoga.
Yeah, so Integral Yoga, founded by Swami Satchidananda in the late 60s. He's kind of famous for opening up Woodstock. He gave like the opening message to Woodstock and had a big impact there. Also Peter Max, if anyone's familiar with Peter Max. Peter Max is actually the one who, famous artist in the 60s, psychedelic artist. He brought Swami Satchidananda over to the States. And then integral yoga, grew from there, different centers and institutes. Um, and where I am now is kind of the headquarters of integral yoga, right? So we still have, centers and institutes in, a bunch of different countries around the world, almost on every continent, not quite. And so, okay, integral yoga, really, my introduction, and probably for many of us, was yoga as a form of physical practice. But integral yoga, really is much larger than that. It focuses on all the different branches of yoga, and really just asking the question, what does it mean to live a yogic life, in all ways? And even though the terminology, the term hatha yoga wasn't something I was even really that familiar with, it was just called yoga. But now I see hatha yoga more as like the physical aspect of yoga, which is one very, very important branch. So while that is still like the most popular probably for integral yoga, um, Yana yoga, Raja yoga, Japa yoga, Karma yoga, those are all extremely important as well, within the integral yoga community. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So obviously when you took your first class, it wasn't this style of yoga. So somewhere along the way, you found people who were teaching this. This was in line with how you were attracted to it as a style of yoga. How did you end up directing the entire organization? How did that come to be?
Yeah, very naturally, and not with my, intention of like, I'm going to make this happen. That's for sure. So actually, my intention was to find a community to live in. That was my big hope. And I had some commitments, and I was teaching regularly. Um, and once I kind of got myself freed up, I I came here to live. So I was starting to do some research in different yoga communities in the U.S. because I still wanted to be close to my family. And as soon as I came here, it just felt like home to me, And they had a month-long residential program that I took, and I haven't left since doing that program. Uh, and I started not as the director. I started as like the membership coordinator, different positions, and then eventually that position just opened up. The old director resigned, and they asked me if I wanted to do it. So I stepped in, and it's been now 6 years since then. Yeah.
Got it. Um, so what's the mission of the organization? Like what are you doing? I'm just curious. Like, is it supporting the teachers and education, things like that?
Mainly supporting the teachers, right? So the association that I sort of oversee, anyone who's taken an integral yoga teacher training is able to become a part of that. And
Mhm.
so, kind of my role is fostering community amongst the teachers, right? And part of that is the podcast that I had you on. So yeah, that's kind of my niche a little bit. Yeah,
Got it. Okay. And you said you're in Virginia.
correct. Yeah.
I realized when we talked the first time, I don't think I even knew where you were calling in from. It's good to have like some geographic orientation. Okay, so at this point, I'm sure we've skipped over a lot of things in the chronology of your life, but at this point, what does life look like for you? I mean, I know we had talked a little bit about some of the topics, which are really teaching topics. I'm curious,
Are you teaching? Are you training teachers? Like, what does life look like for you right now?
Yeah, what does life look like for me right now? Yeah, I mean, I teach, I work this job.
Yeah.
I'm a father of two young ones. So that's a great blessing here in my
Yeah.
life. I live a pretty simple life, to be honest with you. Like we're really out in the middle of nowhere here. So I'm in the woods a lot, hiking, um, and meditating. I also have kind of side projects that I'm very interested in. You know,
Hmm.
um, Part of what I'm really grateful for regarding the position of director of the IYTA is that it got me started on the interviewing track and falling in love with that. And I started kind of a side project helping people capture their life stories. So uh, I've probably interviewed close to 150 people now, and I just kind of try to go through their life and chronicle it. And that really happened actually because my last grandparent passed, and I realized how powerful it would have been to have her story, and we didn't have the technology available up until recently where it would be so easy to record her and just have it available to everyone that wants to listen to it. So yeah, that's another side project. And then I really love leading guided meditations too. So I've been doing
Hmm.
a lot of that in recent years. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, that whole idea of memorializing things. I know oftentimes when my parents send me emails with history of our family, I print them out and just save them, kind of with my old photo albums because you don't really have, unless you have old film of your family, you don't oftentimes really have a way to memorialize. Back in the day, obviously, we used to have pictures. Now everything's digitized. So it's kind of nice to get like the oral transcription of the history of a family. That is really.
Yeah, exactly. And I find that there's something about the voice that's extremely
Yes.
powerful and unique. Like our essence is almost contained in our voice. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that actually is a great segue. We were talking beforehand about the use of language in teaching. And, when you're talking about voice and using voice and, this idea of the use of language in teaching, I know a lot of the yoga teachers that I work with, their struggle is around how many words, what words, word choice, um, how word choice makes them feel like how do I need to be teaching and sharing if we're talking about the voice, the cueing part, so that I can really feel confident and the words are really landing on my students. What are some of the things that you think about or you work with teachers on when it comes to this idea of use of voice and language?
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people have different perspectives on this. So I'm just sharing mine. Um, to start out with, I really feel that overall, probably your average person today is extremely inundated with language,
Mm,
like it's just constant input, audio input.
yeah.
Um, and so I feel fairly strongly that yoga can be a great respite for that potentially, right? Or at least I don't I don't want to continue with um, adding to that feeling of overwhelm for a person.
Hmm.
If they come to my class, I want them to experience a sort of spaciousness. It's really actually becoming a dad made me realize this a lot too. Watching like the development of language for the kids and how they often can feel overwhelmed. I can sense their overwhelmness, when it's just so much stimulation, stimulation, stimulation. Um, And I often feel that kind of teachers, like if I'm attending classes, to be honest with you, like it feels like too many words for me personally. I don't
Hmm.
need so many words. Um, and as a teacher, I probably used more words back when I was starting out, you know? Uh, and I inquire like why that is. Like why am I maybe speaking so much? I think that's an important question just to ask. Uh, And for me, kind of it was because I wasn't focused as much on the students. I was focused more on myself. And what someone else might think of me if I wasn't speaking all the time. You
Hmm.
know, like, oh, that means I didn't know what to say, or I was out of control as a teacher, whatever it is, I wasn't scripted enough. Um, Kind of like this idea of even like on a radio, like dead air, something
Right.
along the line. So it's like my self-consciousness that caused me to fill the space. And
Hmm.
so now I try to be very aware of that and okay with more space. Um, and then just very, very conscious with my language. Like if I can say something, once and clearly, I don't need to repeat it, multiple times. And also, if there's more space, there's, I think, a higher likelihood that it's actually going to sink in whatever I'm saying, as opposed to the person tuning out because again, they're kind of overwhelmed by the amount of instruction that they're getting.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how, as teachers, we're trying to gauge whether it's too much or not enough because the person's not talking back to us. So we have this group of
Yeah.
people and we're having this sort of one-sided conversation. So some of the social cues we might have in a regular conversation, we don't have that. And I'm curious too, because when you were describing your first encounter in yoga, that you didn't understand the language. And so you had to depend on visually watching the person. And, now as a teacher, especially considering this idea of how much should I be saying, how do you gauge that? I mean, they're not talking back. Is it something that you're seeing in what they're doing? How do you gauge how much is too much?
Yeah. It's a great question and really good awareness to understand that this is very different than our regular interactions where there's a sort of back and forth. Um, uh, and that's not being the case. I don't know if I really have such a great answer. I'd be curious to hear your answer. I'm sure you've considered this. Um, to me, like the best answer that I can give is to tune into what feels right for me.
Mm,
And that, like, I'm just kind of like working. Well, I'm always watching them, right? And if they're following along clearly, if my instructions are clear, then there's no problem. You
mhm.
know, if they seem to be out of sorts or they don't know what they're doing, then maybe I haven't given enough instruction.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that because you're using the visual as the feedback in lieu of the verbal. And
Mm.
I mean, that is really, in a way, all we have to go on when we go into the room, unless we're teaching a private where the person is talking back to us. I was even thinking the other day, or talking the other day, when I did a training with a group of teachers and we were talking about anatomy, um, and just this idea of watching them and how your cues land on them as a way to figure out, is it really working? Is what I'm saying working? So that visual is absolutely, the key. The other piece we were talking about, which was, I hadn't actually thought about it in detail, the idea of when you're looking at your students, unlike in a conversation, you're not really looking at them in their faces as if you're talking to a person. You're kind of, and I'd be curious how it comes up for you. You're kind of saying things, not so much out into the ether, but you're kind of saying something to the group and then watching the bodies move, not necessarily looking in the eyes of the students as if you would be talking, or even like just giving a talk to a group of people where you might scan the room and look at people. And this is a curious thing sometimes for teachers where they're shifting from practicing with their class all the time to walking around the room. They tell me they don't know where to look. They're feeling uncomfortable with just using their words to guide their students and not knowing, am I supposed to be looking at people or just sort of scanning the room? And when we think about this whole idea of use of language, but we're sort of working with one traditional arm behind our back because the person's not talking back to us.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I'm looking at the bodies, right? Like that's really what you're looking at the body, and then the body, if you see if you see someone, you can't always be right because you don't know what's going on within a person's body, but we have to do our best. But if you see someone who it seems like, you know, their asana can improve from where it's at a little bit, then there can be an attempt to offer language to make that improvement. So that's really helpful to me. It's like I'm looking, I'm seeing, and then I notice something, and then the words come out based on what I'm noticing.
Yeah, and that to me is it's almost like a sequence of events. You're looking at them, so that's one part of the sequence, not yoga sequence, but sequence of events. And then the next part is you're noticing something about them just from your observation. And then the next thing is that might trigger you to say something additional. So it's this sort of very economical use of words instead of just words, which sounds like what you were talking about before, this idea of just filling the space.
That's right. I think, yeah, something that I, feel just passionately about now and have had to work with myself about it is really believing that the space is a service.
Mm.
The space is a service, and if I'm not sure, uh, saying nothing is probably the best is my best option. If I am sure, if I am clear, speak the words. But if I'm not, just hold the space and believe in the power of the silence. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you really hit on what oftentimes holds teachers back from doing that. It's the uncomfortable feeling that comes up in the silence, which, I can even remember when I started teaching, we didn't use music. I mean, that was really never even considered to be something that you would do. So we were just walking around talking with no music. And it only happened sort of organically over the years that people just started to bring music into class. And it always to me felt like, and still today when I use music, it sort of feels like sort of a space filler. Like you're trying to sort of fill the
Mhm.
space with something, almost like walking into an elevator with a group of people and you're either standing there in silence or there's some sort of music and at least that fills the space. And I don't know what it is about humans that there's that uncomfortableness when no one is saying anything. Like I know my boyfriend is one of those people that if we do walk in an elevator, he will talk to the person if there's just us two and a person. And I know when we walk in, there's that 2 second moment where I am waiting in horror for him to say something and I know he's going to. And it's like that silence that is just deafening to me because I know he's going to say something. I don't feel the need to say anything. And then we're going to get into most likely an awkward conversation until we get to whatever level this person gets off. And so it's just even just in natural day to day, that idea of silence can sometimes be anxiety provoking. So what would you say to a yoga teacher who, because if you're really honest with yourself, I bet a lot of teachers listening will agree, oh, it just is so hard when it's quiet. I just feel like I have to say something. So how do you manage those feelings?
Yeah. I'd say just flip the script, you know. Probably most teachers are also students and take classes, if you're not, I would recommend it because that informs my teaching, so much when I'm a student. I've, there's always there's just always so much to learn from other teachers, in either direction, right? What I'm not going to do and new ideas of things that I haven't thought about that I'm going to do. So my guess would be that most people um, that when they're taking the class that they're really okay with the silence and maybe they even welcome it as a student. And so if that's the case for you when you're the student, why wouldn't it be the case for the students when you're the teacher? You know, um, that's helpful. I mean, I just believe in this so profoundly, in silence, and that it's essential for our wellness and well-being. especially in the time that we're living in for the reasons that I gave before. So that really checks me. You know, some people might not like me for it or something like that, but we went over this last time. It's like that's all a part of it. That's going to happen no matter what. So the best thing that I can do is follow what's true to me and hope that it lands. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could even make the case for sort of from a nervous system regulation standpoint, it's kind of necessary to give people some time when they're in your class with nothing, like almost no music, no talking, just to kind of let their nervous system kind of settle. Like even in the first 5 minutes, just have them come in and be in child's pose or on their back, whatever starting point you're at, and just nobody saying anything. Like I just
Mm.
think about those moments of silence, whether I get in my car or just something during the day. And it's almost like the silence is deafening because all the other things we do are so outwardly loud, obviously loud.
Yeah, totally. Um, you know, I could share a little bit about the integral yoga hatha sequence if you like, because it might be a bit different. It was different for me than what I had previously experienced.
Mhm.
Um, if you want, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So there's some unique aspects. I mean, you can sort of call it traditional hatha yoga in a way, but it wasn't traditional for me. Um, so one is that, you know, the standard class is an hour and a half, right? So
Mhm.
that's pretty long,
Yeah.
right? It was longer than most classes I was taking, and that obviously that can be adapted, but that's that's the amount of time and for a good reason, actually. So all classes start out with chanting. That's the one thing, right? And also eye exercises, right? Which I think are kind of cool. I never realized that my eyes actually are kind of tired too, and the eye
Oh,
exercises are extremely helpful. Um, there's not just one shavasana at the end. There's a few throughout. Like the last one is the longest one, but there's usually two or three just for a few moments again to just, you know, let go, rejuvenate before continuing on. So that was somewhat unique. Um, and then, you know, we call it even, you know, Shavasana Yoga Nidra, you know, at the end of every class. You do a Yoga Nidra, and then you work through the koshas and, you know, through the body scan. And then, you know, and then just give time, obviously, when you're taking them to that deepest place. And then once you get to that deep place, you know, you step back for at least 5 minutes, you know, good 5 minutes of silence, if not 10. And then following that, always pranayama and meditation as well. So that's every class. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's certainly kind of a full, well-rounded experience. I remember my original training was with Baron Baptiste, and for many years, 90 minutes was the standard. And it was a pilgrimage. You would get up at 9, you would go to the studio, you would wait in line, you would get in and put your mat down and do the practice 90 minutes. You know, by the time you got home, it was probably 3 hours soup to nuts, but that was what you did. And that was what was um, not required, but that was all there was. There was no such thing as a 60-minute class. And you know, while the sequence itself didn't contain all these components, the timing, and no one really ever questioned it. It really only sort of over the years started to shift in terms of more studios, more options, more formats, you know, and the shorter class just sort of, I remember at one point we even had like an hour class at lunchtime, and that was really odd because it was, but we figured at lunchtime people wouldn't have 90 minutes to do yoga. Let's talk a little bit about meditation. You know, we talked beforehand, and that's something that's really important to you. It's obviously part of this, you know, especially for students who um, feel like the yoga is the moving part that they can do, quote unquote, but the meditation is the stillness component that maybe they don't feel they can do. Or even for teachers, you know, sort of, what do I say? What do I do? What kinds of things come up for you when you think about adding meditation as kind of a part of what we're doing when we're teaching?
Yeah. I mean, there's a few different levels here. You know, on one level, the whole thing could be considered a meditation, right? Like a moving meditation.
Right.
I think it's a good way to look at it, actually. Um, and then adding a formal meditation, I don't know, it really depends on the person. I think the teacher a lot and how familiar they are, experienced they are with meditation. Um, Again, the silence is never a bad way to go, even just having that space for your students. But I also find the guided meditation to be really impactful. So like kind of what we're talking about here, right, is a bridge between words and silence, right? And for a lot of people, because their lives are so heavy on the side of words, to take them all the way into silence is like kind of jumping into the deep end of the pool when you haven't really learned to swim. So guided meditation is kind of like that bridge, right? And you could be that bridge potentially if you want to be. If you're feeling called to. Um, so yeah, I guess you're asking now about maybe guided meditation, and yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, especially because I feel like for some teachers, they're not sure what to say. I know for myself, when I guide people through a meditation, I almost feel like I'm meditating at the same time. Like it's sort of organically coming to me what to say. I might start with a particular theme, or I might have an intention to do something in a particular way. But it sort of organically comes up. So sometimes when teachers ask me, what do I say? It's not that I'm at a loss for words, but sometimes I'm just kind of in the moment with them. And it's just sort of like it's coming through me, sort of thing. And those are always the interesting things to try to operationalize for people. So you can say, oh, this is, let me break it down for you. So, how does that happen for you?
Yeah, I also lead guided meditations in this kind of way,
Mm.
where I'm speaking aloud almost what I'm offering to myself.
Yeah.
you know, what's coming up for me. And then I'm just taking that one more step and speaking it aloud. But it was interesting. I had someone on my podcast uh, recently, and she's also a very experienced guided meditation teacher. And she took a totally different approach, and she was very big on like, have your whole script ready beforehand. And when I'm leading people through guided meditation, I'm not practicing it myself. I'm holding the space and reading it. So I understand that what she's saying. Um, for me personally, uh, authenticity is very important. And I always
Mm.
want to be as authentic as I possibly can. And I'm always going to be more authentic myself if I'm in the experience. But again, that can be maybe overwhelming to some people, to feel not prepared. And of course, like anything else, it takes practice, right?
Mm.
Like I led, during the pandemic online daily meditations for a few years, so I was constantly leading people in guided meditation. And I'm sure if I look back to the first ones that I led, I would be kind of embarrassed
Mm.
now. But that's just what it takes, right? As you know, the same thing with just teaching yoga. You just have to put in the time. There's no way around it, and hopefully give yourself grace to fumble and learn until you become stronger.
Mhm. Yeah. Do you ever have the experience? Sometimes when I'm guiding people through meditation, I'll have a thought that comes to my mind and I'll be nervous to share it. And so there's sort of that frontal lobe interference or ego interference where it's like, oh, you don't want to say that. And because it's silent, right? There's no music and they're just either laying in Shavasana or sitting in seated positions. Again, their eyes are closed. There's no visual feedback. So you have to, as the teacher, just continue to nudge yourself forward as if you're driven by this mission to do the thing. Does that ever happen to you, especially because you are working kind of in this organic way?
Yeah, definitely. It kind of brings me to something I was thinking that maybe we would talk about a little bit. Um, that maybe there is a difference between being a teacher and being a facilitator, right?
Mm.
So I can actually say I'm not that comfortable with the term teacher. I don't love it. I honor the fact that I take that role on sometimes. Uh, but what I feel more comfortable with is facilitator. And that in a way I'm sharing, whether it's, hatha yoga or meditation, I'm sharing with others my own practice. That's the way I look at it. Um, so And I think it's especially important considering what you're bringing up in regards to not really getting the feedback, especially with meditation, right? Because then you're not even like looking at the body. You don't know what's going on in someone else's mind. So you're just constantly taking leaps, right? Like, and that happens to me all the time too. Like, yeah, something will come up and I'm not sure if I should say it or not. But what I know is the truth is like I can say that thing, and for one person, it's the exact thing that they need to hear. And it's extremely useful. And for the person sitting right next to them, it's off putting. You know, that's the reality of it. Right. So because that's the reality, does it mean I don't want to engage it in that at all or take any leaps? No, it just, like I said, the best that I can do is to share what my practice is. And I often say that before I start teaching. I say everything that I say is an offering. And I'm very direct because you need to be direct when you're teaching or facilitating, whatever it is, um, because you don't want to use a lot of words. But please know that everything is an offering. If you want to take it, use it. If it feels best to leave it aside, leave it aside. This is your practice. That's pretty much a standard for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like what you're describing, that sort of pause in the moment of should I say this for concern or worry or fear that it's going to land with some people and not land with others, and maybe even like you said, like not offend anyone, but maybe rub them the wrong way or something along those lines. I feel like that is the fork in the road that yoga teachers hit in regards to a lot of different things in their teaching. Now we're talking about meditation, and it's always interesting to me to think about that. So you come upon this fork, and you either go down the path of just say it, just follow your heart, just go with it, or that sort of mind, brain, frontal lobe, ego part says no, don't go there. And in my head, when I think about it, I think, is it courage that it takes to kind of
Mm,
keep moving forward? Is it being empowered? Is it being in integrity? Like, what is it being committed to? Like, what is this may be like too deep, but I'm just curious because again, a lot of these kinds of things are the topics that teachers want to know more about. And we're sort of talking about something that you're just doing, like you're out there doing it. But if someone, it's like, if I know how to tie a shoe and I have to teach somebody how to tie a shoe, I have to break down what I'm doing. So I'm trying to sort of, as we're talking, break down a little bit about what you're saying so that someone listening who really wants to lead their students through meditation, but who maybe has some concerns about, well, how, if I don't have a script, I'm just flying blind out there, and I might have thoughts come up and I'm just afraid to say them for fear that it'll come across weird or whatever the concern might be. So what like, if you think of it like a fork in the road, do you just feel confident enough that you're able to just say to yourself, I'm in the right place, I know what I'm doing, I'm going to stay the course and say what these thoughts are that are popping into my mind? Was it just over time you just sort of trained yourself to, when you felt a little uncomfortable, just move through the discomfort, and at the end of the class everything will be okay?
yeah. There's a lot there.
Hmm.
Um, One thing for sure I want to make clear is like I don't think there's anything wrong with having a script, especially when you're first beginning, right? That could be a great way to get started. Maybe the most important thing I could say is to really understand that you need to put the time in,
Hmm.
you know, uh, and and just practice, if it's something that you want to do. Um, hmm. Yeah. I lead a meditation sometimes. Okay. This is kind of going to the other end. I lead a guided meditation sometimes where I speak one word at a time and then hold and then leave like space, like maybe 20 seconds. And then I
Mhm.
speak the next word, just one single word. Like I'll just say flow
Mhm.
and calm, you know, because I really understand that we all have a different relationship with every word. This is
Totally.
my belief. Through our experiences with language, each of us have a different relationship with the words themselves. So again, you know, my probably the most important word to me is gratitude, you know. But one time I was having a conversation with someone and they told me they really can't stand that word. And that was actually a great experience for me to have because I realized like any word, it could be peace, it can be love. For someone, it's not going to be their word. And that's
Yeah,
fine,
could be
you
their
know?
could be their trigger word, something that,
Yeah,
at face value, you might think, how could that possibly? But, sometimes I think social media is to blame in part for stuff like that because I feel like some words get overused, especially words that at face value have nothing but a joyous, loving, wonderful energy to them, but they get overused and maybe that pops into people's minds. Um, yeah, and I can even say, even just in the little demo you just did, like I could feel when you left that space. Well, first, when you said the word, my mind went someplace immediately. And because you have the gap in between the words, I don't know how you wouldn't have your mind go someplace. Like every single person in the room is going to have their mind go someplace. And because it's almost like the synapse is drawn out. So instead of the nerves firing, blah, 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 it's like one is firing and then the next one's firing. So you're just leaving that gap for the person to identify something that comes up for them. And that isn't, I've never heard of that. That's a very interesting way to guide a meditation, which again, when we were thinking of what we were talking about before, teaching class, you don't have to say all these words. You could just say, do this, do this, do this, and then leave them. Do this, do this, do this, and then leave them in the pose, And I almost think of it like organic acoustic guitar. When you have a song you really like, and then you see the performer perform it, and it's just them and the guitar, and all the other stuff is stripped away. And it's still a song, but yet sometimes it hits you so differently because there's nothing else.
that's right. So that there's nothing else is a key factor, right? Any musician knows, right? To
Mm,
work with space, right? And mm, I think too, like believing that people need room to discover truth on their own, right?
mm,
Like, I don't know about you, but I've experienced a good deal of pain in life from trying so hard to, you know, have someone else see what I'm seeing,
mm,
and if I could just find the right words, the right way to communicate with them, they'll
mm,
understand what I'm seeing.
mm,
But that doesn't work out so well.
mm,
What I've learned is that like life itself is a teacher, right? And it's almost like life is my friend in that way. Uh, and so it's not all on me, right? So when I'm facilitating a space, you know, I just I want to have that room for someone to make a discovery on their own because I know what it's like to make a discovery, right? Like when I make a discovery myself, my life is never the same anymore. It's like finding a gem. And I know we've all had this experience, right? You find this great gem, this truth, and it's like, wow, like
right.
that just feels real to me. So
Mm.
I want other people to be able to make those that to me is more powerful than me handing them the gem without them
Right.
discovering it themselves.
Right, right. Yeah, I feel like, for a lot of maybe newer yoga teachers or teachers, like a lot of times I'll have teachers say to me, I really wish I was the kind of teacher who could say a couple of things at the end of class. Maybe not a meditation per se, but sometimes they'll call it a Dharma talk, or sometimes they'll just say, or even throughout the class, I wish I had the courage to speak from my heart or speak authentically, sort of color outside the lines, not just be sharing words that are about how to do the pose. And, part of what you're describing when I hear it is, your strong belief in the value that the person gets from whatever you're guiding them through. Let's call it a meditation. And it's almost like any self-consciousness or worry or concern you have sort of takes a back seat to the value that is possible. Not that you're spoon feeding it to them or forcing it on them, but and so as I'm hearing you talk, I think that again, going back to that idea of being at the fork in the road, like, do I say this? I feel uncomfortable. I don't feel, like I'm qualified. That comes up a lot. Like, who am I to be leading a group of
Mm,
people through meditation? I'm not, someone who's been, I don't know, whatever, how the mind works. Like, we always think we're not qualified to do these things.
mm.
And yet what I'm hearing you say is the benefit is, you so believe in the benefit to the people in your class, let's just say, that on some level, do you feel like that nudges you forward even in those moments where you might feel a little nervous, or if you ever feel that way anymore, but is that sort of what allows you to just keep pushing through any feelings of discomfort?
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hope you I mean you're totally onto it. That's the greatest strength or guiding principle that I have. But every moment is different, you know. Sometimes my self-consciousness wins the
Hmm.
day, you know. Uh that's also why it's a practice. It's a practice of bringing the focus back to them, to the students,
Mm-hmm.
and asking, really, is this about me or is it about them? Is it me wanting to be liked and have people say that I'm a great teacher and yada yada yada? Is that my motivation? You know? Or am See, to me it's really about something more serious than that. Like, right? And that's what yoga was for me. It was this great, wonderful discovery of um, I don't know, like a sanctuary, right? Like being on that mat, it's like a sanctuary, you know, and it's so powerful. So in a way, it's beyond the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yes, 100%. Like
Yeah.
that's my aim. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's funny when you said serious, that really resonated with me because um I also, I mean, not to say that yoga teachers in general don't take things seriously, but I know myself and I take things really seriously. That's just like my nature. I just, not serious as in like as a bad thing, but just I have so much reverence for what we do as teachers, all of us, everybody listening, the two of us, like there's just, especially now, there's just such importance for the kind of service that we do in the world. And so I know for myself, that's the kind of thing that pushes me forward. Even if I might feel a little nervous, I say to myself, this is so good for people, even if it rubs them the wrong way. Just being in the moment and not being on your phone and not watching TV and not doing whatever the compulsive thing is, or just being in this space. Like, you can't go wrong. You're here, you're going to get some kind of value. And whether I look at myself as a teacher or a facilitator, I'm the spark to do that. And so I sort of picked that up a little bit as also what's driving you, is that there's a seriousness there, almost not maybe on the level of gravitas, like heaviness, but just like really a commitment to the value that you're sharing with people is what pushes you forward.
Yeah. I mean, like here's an example of the power of meditation for me is like going to a very deep place and, asking, a question, meditating on, what's the point of it all? What's the point of life?
Mm,
Right. For me, uh, the best answer that has come is to be of service, do something that's good. I believe that we all actually have the same dharma, and that
mhm.
is service. That
Mm,
all of our hearts want to serve. It's like how we're made is to serve, is to do something good, and each of us gets to just decide how to do that. And there's an endless variety of ways in order to do that. So to be clear on that, right? That's my intention is to serve. And by doing that, it's going to come back to me. Like I'm going to feel more fulfilled. I mean, that's why we're all teaching, right? Most of us aren't teaching for the money, really. You know, we're teaching because something else is really fulfilled by this experience. And what I would say is being fulfilled is exactly what we're talking about, is holding space for this experience for people to have where they can do some healing. Yeah.
right. Right. Yeah. When I think just about every conversation I've ever had with a yoga teacher, part of why they started teaching is because of the impact yoga had on them and their desire to share that. But I think what so many teachers tell me, and I'd love to know what you have to say about this, is that they feel oftentimes like either they're making things too complicated or they're watching social media and have a perception of how they should come across that's infused with things they see, or they feel like they have some inner story that they're not good enough to be teaching yoga. So the purity of why they're teaching and the dharma that they initially felt, they're not actually connected to that when they're teaching. And that's a lot of the work I do is like, how can we strip back from what all
Mm.
this extra stuff that you're doing to get to the essence of why you even are teaching in the first place? So for someone listening who is hearing what you're saying and they really remember that nugget of that sort of initial spark, but they feel like now they're sort of far away from that. Things feel difficult and challenging and they don't feel authentic. How do we get back to our connection to that so that when we go in to teach, we are closer to that initial reason, that feeling like I'm doing what I am supposed to be doing. Like even if I have a regular day job and this is something I do part, like that's all ancillary. I wanted to teach yoga. I trained to teach yoga. I'm teaching yoga. It, maybe I'm making it too complicated or whatever it is. It's just not feeling like what we're talking about. How do we get back to that?
Yeah. So, what occurs to me is, if I'm interested in going to a certain place, right, getting back to this place that you're referring to, uh, it might be a good idea to identify what the obstacles are
Mm,
between me and that place, right? Um, so what I think is the main obstacle, you know, is that the power of um, social influence, other people. Right? That's kind of what you're alluding to. Um, and I don't want to make it a problem. It just is, right? Like we are social creatures, and we are very influenced by those we spend time with. Some of us more than others, right? So like this realization is actually what led me to live where I live now, right? Because I started looking at it like, you know, I have a responsibility to care for Avi in a way, like a third person, right? And so can I put him in a position where he can thrive more, right? And when I saw it like that, I saw, okay, like, yeah, of course, it makes all the sense in the world. Like your environment, right, is going to affect you a lot. So your your environment isn't everything, but it's a lot,
mm,
and I want to just be honest about that, right?
mhm,
Um, so right, like looking how other people are doing things and knowing that everyone is doing the same thing, right? It's like no one is actually like leading the show or, very, very few people. We're all being influenced by others. So there's an opportunity actually to be a better example for someone else, right? Like imagine that young yoga teacher just starting out, right? And they're looking to you
Mm.
You know, what kind of an example do you want to provide to them, knowing that that example that you provide is going to be extremely impactful to them? So like understanding um, this force of just like society and fitting in, and that it's giant. It's absolutely giant. I don't think it can be overstated. To me, just being aware of that, I don't have to even think about what's next. Just be aware of the power of this force, and then have faith in that awareness that your actions are going to start to change a little bit based on your awareness of this.
Mhm. Yeah, I think as you were talking, it reminded me of when you said earlier in our conversation about going to class. As a teacher, it's so important that you go to class. And now we're talking about the power of influence. I've had many a conversation where teachers will go to other people's class and it actually triggers them into feeling that they're not a really good teacher because they're going to this person's class and seeing what this person's doing. And instead of being inspired by it, they feel badly about themselves, this sort of comparison. So, that power of influence, we can sort of take it in either direction. But I like what you said about imagine a newer teacher's coming to your class. How can you be an example for that person? Because that, again, brings you back into that more empowered place of sitting in your dharma, sitting in that service role, rather than sitting in this other role of comparing yourself to other people, which is part of the human experience, but yet, it brings us into all the negative.
That's right. Like, you know, if I'm really interested in authenticity, right? It's like that's not something that can be faked. Like it has to be genuine. So, mm, if I want to become a more authentic person, how can I do that?
Mm,
Right. Um, for me, this takes me to kind of deeper spiritual place, but I'll just say it. It has to do with my relationship to the creator itself. However, God, whatever name you want to use, mm, this is very impactful to me, right? This gives me permission to do what feels right because I believe that I can honor my own makeup, and that all of us can, and we don't have to keep playing this game of comparing each other, uh,
mm,
because you can't put human beings on a spreadsheet anyway. That's what I say, like, right? Like you can't compare. Like at some point in my life, I really saw how much pain I was experiencing from just constantly judging myself all the
yeah.
time. And am I better than someone else? Am I worse? How good am I? Blah blah blah. And I just saw the exhaustion of that game. And so I try not to play that game at all anymore and just kind of take responsibility for my own makeup. And when I feel that self consciousness, start to rise, then there's no problem. That's a part of it all. And just by accepting it, it seems to dissipate a
Mm.
lot and give me permission to just be. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I know for myself when I go to classes, if I see something that's different from how I do it, I'm inspired by that. And at the same time, I say to myself, I really love the way I teach. This is not something that resonates with me as an authentic way for me, but I can appreciate it without making it something bad about me. And, that's oftentimes the conversation I'll have with teachers is how can you see it, experience it, and not make it a comparison exercise. More just there are thousands and thousands of teachers, and we all, if we're really in our authentic way, we're all going to be teaching differently, even though the building blocks, the poses may look similar.
That's right. So like your foundation is strong. That's what I hear you saying. And with a strong foundation, so much more in life becomes possible, I think. Even I consider relationships, right? Like if the foundation of the relationship is strong, then now we can play on top of it of like, all right, you did this thing that felt a little inconsiderate to me. Can you please stop doing it? Like whatever. Um, and it's everything is not going to break away and fall into like disaster and be done and over with because of that, because the foundation is strong, right? So like is my foundation with myself strong? And that's what I hear you say, like you have a strong foundation, and now you can be inspired by what someone else says or whatever it is. It's just a different way of moving through life.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think I'm trying to kind of pull things together, for someone listening in terms of like a couple of takeaways. The thing that I really want to just try to pull together a little bit more around the how to, and I know this is almost an impossible thing, but if you were to offer somebody some how to's around this kind of big picture idea of being more authentic, like we talked a lot about the meditation piece and coming up to that fork in the road and thinking about the benefit to the students. So even if you're really wanting to speak from your heart and you're feeling a little self-conscious, maybe thinking about, well, this is beneficial, this is going to be helpful to them, and letting that sort of nudge you in the direction of being as authentic as possible. Are there other things that come to mind? Like some of the things that I think about are keeping what you're doing in the class really simple if you're feeling like being authentic is hard for you. Because if you're dealing with new sequences all the time and complicated cueing and even talking a lot, which you were saying before, now you've got three big moving pieces. And on top of it, you want to try to feel more comfortable and be more authentic, that might be putting a lot on your plate. So I oftentimes say things like use a consistent sequence, have a particular way you're going to share your cues. I loved what you said about leaving more time for silence, because that not only helps them, maybe it helps you feel your feet on the floor, ground yourself, and kind of nudge yourself into speaking more authentically. What kinds of things, I mean, maybe this is even something that comes up when you work with teachers or talk to teachers, for people who want to show up more authentically, how can they do that?
Hmm. Yeah. And by the way, I loved what you shared so much about keeping it simple, and sticking to one sequence. Last time I've shared it with like a
Uh,
bunch of people since that, because I think that message is a powerful one that especially a lot of yoga teachers really um, can benefit from hearing that message. So I'm all about that, the simplicity. Um, and this is a good question. Uh, yeah, like I was a part of a program here. There's lots of programs happening all the time. And it was from such a wise teacher. He was amazing. And I sat in on one of his sessions, and he he probably said like 20 to 30 extremely profound things, during an hour session. And the thought occurred to me that there is overwhelm from that on the
mm,
students, you know, on the student side. So he might have done better. I don't know, but he might have done better by choosing one thing to focus on and just have that be the takeaway. Um, so maybe that's an answer,
mm,
is just choose one thing to
mm.
focus on, how to be more authentic. Hmm. I mean, it's really a deep question, right? It has everything to do with a person's own relationship with themselves,
Well,
you know?
that's exactly, I mean, as you were thinking, I was thinking, and because I don't know, I don't have the answer, but that is what comes up for me. I almost feel like it comes from your own feeling of self-worth. I mean, if I feel that I am of value in the world and I have something of value to share, I'm more inclined to speak from my heart. I'm more inclined to share it. But if I feel that I'm not good enough, or I don't have something of value to share, or somebody else is better than me, I might not have the courage to show up authentically for fear of, as you said before, being judged by other people. Um, and I know from talking to so many teachers that, over the years have worked with me in my one-on-one program where they have more of a chance to share openly, the stories will come out of their past and their past history and encounters with you know, people in their life or family members or teachers, you know, just different things that cause them to have a certain belief about themselves. And so oftentimes at the root of the problem that they have when they go in to teach their yoga classes is this, if we kind of go back in time, something that happened to them that made them feel less than. And now there's sort of that burn on their soul that they're carrying around.
That's right. You know, you know, I think ultimately I don't want to be hiding, you
Mm,
know, in any way. I'm very interested in the concept of cleanliness. What
mm,
does it mean to be clean as a person? So, uh, you know, there's always more dirt on the inside. And so part of it is being okay with the process of cleaning. So, mm, something that I'm trying to do is to notice when does the dirt come up? You know, in this case, it can be something that's inauthentic. You know, when I said something that didn't feel in alignment with what I really believe. Okay, but like in that moment, when I say those things, in that moment is everything, right? Because then the story can be created one way or another, right? Um, I could, oh, I'm not a good person because I said this, you know, I'm phony because I said this. Or I can look at it and just say simply, okay, maybe I'm not going to say that next time. You know, I said it, there's no problem. To basically accept everything beforehand, accept it
mm,
all, you know, before
mm,
you've even begun. That
mm,
way, that allows you to make as many, you know, missteps or errors as you can because you just realize you're going to anyway. And
mm,
then that's, I think, how growth happens, you
mm,
know, not by pretending that it didn't happen or inflating yourself with another a thought about, but I do this and this and this and this really well. So that one thing that wasn't authentic, it doesn't count because I have all these other good qualities, you know?
mm, mhm. Yeah, and I feel like for yoga teachers too, and even as you're just talking now, this thought popped into my head, the way you were describing it. Do you feel like people sometimes in their minds make the stakes so high? You know, like sort of when you were describing before, when you use the word gratitude, and maybe I think you had said a student actually said to you verbally, like that was a word that they didn't really like. But then there's probably hundreds of classes where people leave your class and, oh, that meditation was so great. Thank you so much. Or I even think of how many times, you know, you teach a class and you might at the end of class feel like it didn't go well, but people are leaving and they're just thanking you. You're like, oh, that was a great class. Thank you so much. And you're sort of standing there in your own head thinking that was an awful class. And people are leaving saying that was a great class. And then you realize in that moment, somehow in your mind, you made the stakes so high. And not to say that there's any less importance to the work we're doing, but the stakes in our mind, we oftentimes make so high that it can be the barrier to being authentic because we think the risk to, like you just described, the risk to me if I say something that comes across inauthentically or even is inauthentic because maybe I'm in a pickle and I don't know what to say. What's really the risk there? Like, what am I really risking? Unless I don't know, I'm a public facing person and I'm saying something that's fraudulent, you know, like different situation. But in what we're talking about in this human exchange, like what's really, I mean, certainly not hurtful things we're not talking about. So, you know, what's really the risk? But in our minds, I feel like we often make it, this is a do or die thing.
Yeah. Hey, you're totally right. I think we do. In a way, it can be very powerful to like go to worst case scenario, right? Like worst case scenario is that someone doesn't like me, you know, probably, or doesn't
Right,
come take my class again. Can I be okay with that? Right.
right.
And if the answer is yes, I can genuinely be okay with that. Well, that's very freeing,
Hmm.
you know? And the cool thing about that is that from that place of freedom, that the chances of people not liking your class become a lot less, right? Like by making the stakes so high, by that feeling of tightness, you know,
Yeah.
of lack of freedom, there's a good chance you're going to do the opposite of what you actually want to accomplish.
Right,
So,
right. And I don't know, I'd be curious to hear. I know for myself, in those moments when I have that thought of, oh, don't share this and I share it, I always feel so great afterwards. Like I just had a little victory. Do you feel that way, or how do you
Hmm.
feel like when you're done and you feel like you kind of push through a little bit of resistance? How does that feel for you?
Totally. Like, hmm, I feel a victory when something comes up, a situation comes up, and I feel myself about to respond in the way that's comfortable for me because that's how I always respond. But something else questions whether or not I want to do something different this time.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be say nothing, or it might be say something different. And when I do that, that to me is a real victory. Even
Hmm.
just even if it doesn't work out, it's expanding my bandwidth, right? I
Right.
kind of see myself as an explorer a little bit. So it's like, why do I want to say the exact same thing that I've already said like 100 times before? I know what that road is, but I
Hmm.
don't know what all these other roads are that I've never taken before. And by taking them, yeah, it might hurt a little bit or there might be pain, but like, wow, the reward though,
Yeah.
it can be great. I find this new road that I fall in love with, and that becomes my new road that I wouldn't have discovered otherwise.
Right. Right. All right. Well, let me see. I'd love to kind of just wrap up by pulling a couple of things from the different directions we've gone in for someone listening. And one of the things that I'm taking away from this, that I'm really going to be a little bit more committed to myself, is this idea of silence. I really loved that little quick meditation illustration you gave us, about just one word and then nothing. And I just think that is just such a interesting way of thinking about meditation when typically there's words, 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 words. That's just a very interesting cadence, and it opens up a lot of doors to let the recipients of the meditation just kind of go wherever they want to go. So it's almost like just saying to somebody, think of a color, and then just leaving them for 10 minutes, and just like, so that's one takeaway. And I think that actual framework could even be something that somebody listening could experiment with. So the idea of silence. The other thing that I'm taking away from this that I want to just highlight for the listener is this idea of authenticity. And, part of, if I had to tie up everything that we talked about regarding that, for some reason in my head, I just keep hearing myself say, just go for it.
Hmm.
Just go for it. Just put yourself out there. Is there anything like that you want somebody to take away from what we've talked about? Anything that's kind of coming to your mind that you want to kind of seal in for someone listening?
Hmm. Hmm. I mean, just that for whatever it's worth, I believe in your authentic self. I believe in your right to be you.
Mm.
That's a birthright. Yeah, and again, for whatever it's worth, I give you permission to be and to do what feels right for you.
That's great. Yeah, that is so, and I think that will really resonate because I hear that permission idea a lot, that people do feel like they need somebody's okay. And I liked when you said before, like we're all out here doing this. Like we're all doing, almost like there's no one is going to tell you you can't do this or you can't do that. Like part of just doing it is recognizing that you have the freedom to do it. You don't need anybody's okay.
Yeah, that's right. Mhm.
That is great. Okay, so tell people, anything that you want to share, like anything about integral yoga, how to reach you there, or if they're curious more about anything that you'd like to share. Certainly any links that you want me to put in the show notes, I'll add. But for somebody listening, anything you want to direct them to, I just leave that up to you if you want to add anything, how they can find you or.
Yeah, thanks. But I haven't even talked about my meditation with single words in a while, so it's fun to talk about that. But I do have a document with all like the words, and it was fun for me to put it together.
Yeah.
There's, I don't know, probably close to 100 words on there, but just words that to me have a certain power to them. So I'm happy to share that.
Yes,
First of all,
that
if
would
anyone wants to
actually,
see my list, yeah.
yeah, that would actually be good. Because even the couple that you shared, I was like, oh, those are good words, like, and just the exercise of what words would you say, but I would love the prompt. So yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, it is a really cool exercise actually for each person to come up with, like, the here are the words that I would like to use. So yeah, so there's that. What else could I say? I mean, yeah, I'm available if anyone, wants to interact. As I mentioned before, I love interviewing people and listening and capturing people's life stories. That's brought a lot of meaning to my life. So if you want to capture your story, or if you know someone else whose story deserves to be captured, maybe especially someone in their later years of life, you're welcome to connect with me about that. And then I'll also just mention that I have a book that is very dear to me that I put a lot of myself into because I have a background in education, and I believe in kind of the possibilities of what school can look like for our children. So I created a story of how the education system can be kind of changed, and really just, I don't know, the world. Like, simply put, I realized that I was complaining a lot for how things are, and I challenged myself to instead imagine a story where things could go from where we are now into a better place. So I did that. So that's available. It's called A Light in the Tunnel. And I
Oh,
recorded the
cool.
audiobook too, if you want to check that out. But yeah, I think that's enough.
And your podcast, tell people the
And
name
my
of
podcast, of course, yeah, Integral Yoga Podcast. Thank you, Karen.
it.
Yeah, I usually put a couple of episodes out a month. I'll be releasing the one with Karen really soon. So yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for this thoughtful and insightful conversation. I mean, we weren't sure kind of all the directions it was going to go in, and I'm really glad we had a chance to talk about all those meaningful topics. And I know this will definitely be meaningful and helpful for people to listen to. So thank you so, so much. This will actually go live on Monday. So today's Monday, Monday coming up. So I will send you the link and the video portion as well, and I'll be excited to share that with my community and yours. And thank you so, so much for your time. And I'll talk to you on Monday.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm grateful for this experience, Karen. It was wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for tuning in today. I hope you loved the episode. Before you go, I want to leave you with a little extra. Even though we haven't met, I know what it looks like when a yoga teacher is ready for a breakthrough, ready to become the kind of teacher who walks in the room with confidence, shares cues with clarity and purpose, teaches thoughtful sequences easily, and truly enjoys teaching without stress, anxiety, or second guessing. If that's the kind of yoga teacher you're ready to be, here is your next step. DM me the words podcast offer on my Instagram at Barebones Yoga, and I'll send you a special incentive you can use towards any of my programs, whether it's the Yoga Anatomy Accelerator, the Yoga Teacher Confidence Club monthly membership, or my one-to-one signature program, the Yoga Anatomy Blueprint Learning Program. I can't wait to hear from you.